All right. Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can see me and hear me okay. Welcome. We'll go ahead and get started. I just want to be cognizant of everyone's time and get to as many questions as we can. So I'd like to welcome you to the Project Talks event for the AISUM Prize Challenge. I'm going to be your facilitator for today and walking you through some things. My name is Major Amy Ross. I'm active duty Army. I'm serving at NSWC Crane, and I'm currently the program manager for this AISUM Prize Challenge. I just want to thank you all for taking the time to join us. A few things I just want you to keep in mind, like Raquel said in the beginning, if you could please mute your devices, that would be really helpful. We have some who are joining us on Teams, and we have some who are calling in. So just be cognizant of that. I have a very short brief that I'm going to go through, but really this is an opportunity for us to answer your questions in regards to the challenge posting I'm sure you saw. So I'm going to get through that as quickly as possible just so that we can get to those questions. Our team here behind the scenes is going to be capturing those questions and answers, and we will be providing those to you with a Word document. So you'll have those documents today. This will also be, this will also be recorded. So you'll have that option as well. If you need to go back and listen, you'll have that option. So again, stay on mute. If you have a question at any point during this, go ahead and type it in the chat if you're on Teams. I'm sure we do have some people calling in, so we're going to try to get to as many as we can. But it's going to be a little more challenging if you're calling in because we've had some issues with talking over and everything. So if you can, get it into the chat and we'll get to those questions as well. Before I jump in and begin, I do want to say thank you to our partners, NavalX and the Midwest Tech Bridge. They've been working behind the scenes. They're going to be the ones feverishly typing up notes and questions so that we can provide those to you. Also want to take a moment to thank IN3 Indiana. They did all the logistics part to set this up and send out the link. And we've had a really great attendance today. So just want to thank our partners there. And then, of course, Office of Naval Research. They're the ones funding this prize challenge. So just thank you to them. All right, let's go to the next slide, Derek. And you'll have to all bear with me for a little bit. I'm working on 3 different devices here as well, so I can check the chat, talk with you, and go through questions that I have on my computer. Derek, can you go to the next slide for me, please? All right, well, we're going to work through some of those difficulties, but so I'm going to go ahead and get started. We have there we go, panel members here. So all of these personnel on this slide right here are on the call today. The ones in dark blue, I'm going to actually have them introduce themselves because they're going to be some of the people that are answering most of the questions. But this is our internal team that's really helped to put this together. So Mr. Andy Bruff, he's our Expeditionary Warfare lead here at NSWC Crane. Mr. Dan Cable, Special Operations Liaison at NSWC Crane. Lieutenant Commander Tony Vespa, he's our beta team lead. He's been working with us since January on this as well. And then at the bottom, I'm just going to introduce Mr. John Dickinson with our contracting team is online. And Mr. Eric Van Wiltenberg is our legal team lead. So now I'm going to go back to Mr. Blake Busey. I'm going to turn this over to you for a short introduction.
Hey, thank you. Yes, my name is Blake Busey, and I'm an employee at NSWC Crane, Indiana for the Navy, and I am going to be the hardware and UAS platform lead, so I'll be answering some of those questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Blake. Dr. Brent Reynolds.
Hello, my name is Brent Reynolds. I'm an employee at NSWC Crane. I've been charged with implementing the virtualized environment and AISUM and Unreal. And so I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Brent. Dr. Josh Borneman.
Hello, I'm Dr. Josh Borneman. I'm a chief scientist within the Expeditionary Warfare Department here at NSWC Crane. Technical team lead is a little bit general. I'm mostly looking at some of the scenarios that were coming up within the challenge, and also the judging criteria and how things will be judged and assessed. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Marissa Wagler.
Hello, this is Marissa Wagler. I am a contract specialist working at NSWC Crane, and I'm working as the challenge manager of the AISUM challenge. Thanks.
Thanks, Marissa. All right, Derek, we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you so much. Okay, so you're here for the prize challenge, AISUM, so artificial intelligence for small unit maneuvers. So a prize challenge is a way for us to break a difficult thing that we've struggled with and break it into a concept smaller that we can share with you and have industry, academia partners come and compete for an incentive. So this is funded by ONR, like I mentioned earlier. And the way we've decided to work on this prize challenge is in a phased approach. So Derek, if you can go to the next slide. It breaks it down into where we are now and where we are planning to go with the different phases. I'm sure most of you joining us are familiar with artificial intelligence for small unit maneuver, AISUM, or you've at least gone to the challenge.gov posting and read through the scenario. So I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I do want to highlight our phases here because it is very aggressive. We have the white papers, which we're soliciting for right now, probably why most of you are calling in to get some questions answered. And so from phase one, we're going to select 25 up to 25 white papers to move on to phase two. Phase two, as you can see there, is a longer phase. We've built in some time there, but this is where our simulation environment's going to come into play. So we have virtual vignettes that we like to refer to them as, and we are right now we're aiming to have 3 virtual simulation virtual vignettes, and then from those we are going to select 3 teams. Excuse me, I'll back up. From phase 1, after those 25 white papers, 10 teams will move on to phase 2. Up to 10 teams will move to phase 2, and then up to 3 teams will move on to phase 3. So phase 3, as you can see down there, in September of the new FY here, FY21, will be the final exercise, and that'll be a live event at Muscatatuck Urban Training Center, and that's in Indiana. Next slide, please. All right, well, we'll get there we go. Next slide. So Marissa Wagler, she already spoke on here, but she is our technical point of contact. So she's all over the challenge.gov posting. She is that point of contact to go to if you have questions. We've had some people already submit some questions to her. We really appreciate that. And then that is the link. So we're going to leave this up as we go through some of the question and answers. So if you have any questions or anything, you can feel free to email her as well. But hopefully over the next 2 hours, we can answer most, if not all, of the questions that you might have. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump into it. I've got some questions here that were submitted ahead of time. So again, bear with me. I'm going through 3 different devices here, but we'll go ahead and kick this off. So first question that I received is, how close are the example scenarios? So I'm guessing the virtual vignettes in the posting to the actual virtual live test event scenarios. So I'm going to turn this over to Josh Borneman.
Hello. Yeah, so the example scenarios given in the posting are going to be fairly close to what we're going for in both the virtual and real world environment. As you can see from the example scenarios, there's some TBD and some uncertainties there, and those things will be refined as we move closer to those phases of the event. However, I would look for them to be very similar to the example scenarios that are provided. Over.
And Josh, I'm just going to stay in conversation with you here for a few more questions that I have your name on. So Josh, will the judging criteria be weighted and scored, and how is that going to work?
Yes. So right now, the judging criteria as listed are the general, let's say, qualitative categories on which there will be quantitative measures applied. So in the phase 2 and phase 3 judging criteria, it says, as stated, we'll evaluate time and successful navigation of the building, mapping, specific object detection classification, and time to report results after scenario completion. So those are the categories that will be judged. The exact quantitative metrics on those will differ a little bit by scenario. So for instance, when you look at the scenario descriptions, example scenario 1, the maneuver is, begin at the entrance, navigate through the building. And so in a case like that, we would potentially be looking at, time to navigate and exit the building, right? So, time would be highly weighted. However, in example scenario 2, you're beginning at the entrance, but there's a lot more of mapping and recon elements to those scenarios. And so time to exit the building is going to be lower weighted if it's a quantitative metric at all. In that case, it'll probably have to be some degree of a metric, because we do need to limit the overall execution time. But things like mapping completion, percent correct identification, or percent detection of objects will be much more highly weighted than time to completion in something like scenario 2. So the judging criteria are as listed in the posting. And there will be quantitative values applied to those, but they may be slightly different between the different scenarios. Over.
All right, thank you, Josh. I think you answered a couple of the other questions that were up there. So I'm gonna move to Blake Busey. I have a couple of questions for you here. Does control processing have to occur on the drone, or can we move the processing off the drone's hardware?
Yes, so the drone processing can also occur off of the drone on whatever device or ground station you're working with.
Okay, and then follow up to that, Blake.
Amy, do you mind if I interrupt?
Yes.
Blake is a good answer. I'm just going to elaborate. So the vision of both the mission application and the scenario is such that comms with the drone are not going to be guaranteed, and we are not going to guarantee a specific bandwidth. So while receiving data back from the drone and say processing at a tactically relevant machine like a laptop or something would be an acceptable way to perform. Like as I said, we can't guarantee the communications. And also there will be some weighted time element, as it says in the judging criteria, about to report data. So the idea is to make this tactically relevant such that the drone exits the building, it is collected, and then essentially the quote user operator needs to know what the drone has learned within a tactically relevant period of time. And that would be something like 5 minutes or something, right? That's just a notional number right now. So if there is offboard processing done or offboard analysis, those things need to be kept in mind. Thank you. Over.
Thank you, Josh. And Blake, just a follow up to that question, will the starting position of the drone in the building be the same for all competitors?
Yes, the short answer is yes, it will be the same for all competitors. And my understanding is that it will be right outside of the entryway, and then you will enter at the entryway point and through the building.
All right. Thank you, Blake. I'm going to switch it up here a little bit. I'm going to move to the chat and answer a couple of questions from the chat. So Marissa, I'm thinking this is probably going to go to you. Says, who is allowed to submit for the prize challenge? So does it include service academies?
Sorry, I was having issues getting off mute there. So I would recommend reviewing in depth the eligibility requirements that's listed on the challenge.gov website. I think we do a fairly good job of laying it out, but essentially, so main focus is U.S. citizens and entities are eligible to participate. Federal employees are not eligible to participate. So I would definitely just recommend doing an in-depth review of the challenge.gov posting under eligibility requirements and ensure that you do meet the requirements to participate.
Thank you, Marissa. So I'm going back up in the chat. I missed a couple. I've got a question here from Savannah. It says, in the challenge description, it was stated that this is to create a low-risk human-machine maneuver element. Could you further specify what low risk is and how it will be measured? So Dan Cable, I'm going to turn this one over to you, if you can help answer that. So further specify what low risk is and how it will be measured.
Sorry, I'm challenged with the mute button there. It stated that this is to create a low-risk human-machine maneuver element. Could you specify what low risk is? For this challenge itself, we are looking at this being autonomous systems that are going in by themselves. So if you could think of it in our scenario right now, it is the advanced element that's going in, lowering the risk for follow-on maneuvers of the human. Again, this is the crawl walk phase. Hopefully that helps. Please ask if it need be a little more deep.
Yeah, Dan, this is Josh again. So right now there aren't any specific scenario judging criteria associating risk. The low risk is more of the overall mission objective of the AISUM, as Dan touched on. It's sending the drones in instead of having a person, be the first one through the door. So that's the motivator for the challenge, but there is not a quote risk judging element. The ability of the autonomous systems to perform these scenarios as stated is overall the risk reduction. Over.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. So I'm moving down. Scott L has a question. Can you please provide details about the GFP platforms, sensors, and processors that will be used? Are vendors limited to only using the GFP? So Blake, I'm going to turn this one over to you.
Yeah, sounds good. So the GFE hardware is still in the process of being sourced and final design changes are being made. So some of it is still subject to change. However, we did include some creative flexibility for the performers. That way you could add a certain payload limit to the GFE airframe, and that is tentatively set at 0.5 pound.
All right, thank you, Blake. So again, just a reminder, I know we've had several people join us in the meantime. If you have a question and you're on Teams, please go ahead and type it in the chat. We're trying to get to as many questions as we can. So I'm going to switch back over to some that were emailed to us previously. Let's see. Brent Reynolds, I'm going to toss this one to you. Are the objects in the environment static, or will they move to different locations throughout? So talking about our virtual vignettes, I'm just expanding on this a little bit. Can you walk us through a little bit more of the simulation environment that you have and what your team's working on?
Generally speaking, the objects will be static, but there will be some movement at about maybe a human figure, but the objects will remain in the same room. Over.
And Brent, would you mind just expanding a little bit more on the simulation scenarios, the virtual vignettes, if you will? I know they're still being worked, but if you can talk through it a little bit, that would be, I think, helpful.
So the environment is based upon Unreal Engine and AISUM. The building is although we're going to be limiting it to the bottom floor, the building is a 4-story small hospital where, for example, the first vignette, you're going to enter through the front door, navigate through various rooms and hallways, and exit through the back of the building or potentially the side of the building. The idea would be along the way that you would be able to identify or count various objects that are in the room, and as well as then identifying, I think scenario 3, as it's laid out, was to identify as the human elements. We hope to do some scoring along the way. We're still working out a few of the details in terms of what logging device and recording package we're going to use to collect the data. And I expect, as like Josh described, that after it's all done, you're going to offload some data that you captured along the way. I'll just leave it at that and take further questions as we go along. Thank you.
Thank you, Brent. I appreciate it. So a couple more questions here about the platform. So says, Blake, I'm going to turn this one to you. If we get to phase 2, will we be given the GFP hardware for testing development?
All right, so we are looking at expediting our acquisition of the devices, and so we are doing our best to get those to you as soon as possible, but the date of our receipt of those drones is still not set.
Okay, and a follow-up to that is a question from Sebastian. Are we limited to GFE platforms, or can we bring our own robots?
That's a good question, and we are limiting it to GFE platforms. Just a little more explanation on the platform itself. It's going to be the tentative plan that we're looking at right now, and this is subject to change, is a Stretch X quadcopter that's going to be from 500 to 600 millimeter frame with a Pixoc orange cube, a HearLink video and RC link, and forward video and forward sensing and downward sensing. That's sort of the basic framework that we've tentatively planned for. Now, the additional payload option is there for you to be able to propose to add additional payload. Now, that doesn't mean that we will approve the proposal to add a different sensor or a different payload, but it's definitely something we will maintain some flexibility on and work with you individually as we get further down the process.
All right, thank you, Blake. I'm in the chat and I see Ken H had a question about the payload. So I think we answered it there, but Ken, if we didn't, go ahead and let us know so I can get you the right answer. I'm gonna go ahead and move on. Let's see here. We may have answered this one, but Brent, you're probably going to be the best to answer this. Will the GFP has compatibility sensor interface as AISUM? I may be reading that wrong. Does that make sense to you, Brent?
Yeah, the currently, as designed, as Blake was talking about, is that interface will be different than AISUM.
Okay, thanks, Brent. I'm moving down. Dan, I'm going to toss this one to you in the chat. Just more of a comment that you might want to elaborate briefly. It says, curious if you've connected with Shield AI. They did something similar for DIU a while ago.
All right, I'm challenged with the mute button again. No, we have not connected with Shield AI. I believe they are aware of this event. but we have not had any communications or any questions or anything from them at this time. I am aware of the DIU efforts that have been done, and I believe DIU has also been aware of this prize challenge, and I think may even have dialed in today because they have a similar AISUM contracting event that they've been doing. So hopefully, yeah, we'd like to hear from Shield AI and any other industry partner that's playing in this field. Open for discussion. So,
thank you, Dan. So another question we have from Ken H. This is
Amy, this is Josh. Do you mind if I jump in real quick,
Sure.
just to elaborate on what Ken said?
No, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll clarify. We're definitely aware of Shield AI and what they've done. But one of the distinctions, and it relates to some of the other questions we've got here, is that in this event, we're looking to use GFE and look for a more modular capability with what industry and academia can provide of the capabilities of that hardware. So that's a little bit different than other events where they've gone to a single vendor for the complete system that's designed to work as an integrated platform, and it's only ever going to work as its own one company integrated platform. And so we are taking a different approach with this, which presents its own challenges, but we think also presents some of its own benefits. So we're aware of that, and we are just taking a slightly different approach than what those other efforts have taken. Thank you. Over.
Josh, this one may be for you as well, from Ken H. Can you detail the onboard hardware architecture and compute?
So that's probably not a question for me. That's probably something for Blake, if he has more information on that yet. I know there's also a question about when will platform specs be published. So I'm going to turn that over to Blake. I suspect there's a timeline on those. So I'll leave it for him to answer in more detail. Over.
Hey, yeah, this is Blake. So I would expect some specs to come out in January, and then as far as the architecture is concerned, that would also come out around the same time. But it's going to be COTS hardware using open source software as well, such as ArduPilot.
All right, thanks, Blake. So I might butcher this one, but I'm going to read it. So it says, will the GOTS, RTK, and Phoenix software frameworks be made available to the competitors? I'll be honest, I don't know who to toss this to. So any of my panel members want to take this one?
This is Rich Thistle. I wrote it. I'm from DITRA, RD, CX, US. We're the Counter Weapons of Mass Destruction and Counter Threat Network group in DITRA. So GOTS, government off the shelf, meaning it's government-owned software. It's usually unlimited rights. And RTK stands for the Robotic Toolkit Kernel. And then Phoenix is an ARL stack that is not ITAR restricted, that comes out of the a very large 10-year, $150 million investment from the Army in autonomy. And that is also government-owned software. Does that help clarify my question?
Yeah, this is Dan real quick. So understand, how we doing? We have not discussed this. This is a good point of discussion that I think our team needs to go back and address. We were, or some of us were, aware of some of these software frameworks. Our focus is, as Josh was saying earlier, is to separate the hardware from software and focus on the software autonomy. So let's hold this question. We'll do some more discussions and we'll get back with you and the team. Over.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. So I'm just trying to read through the chat here and make sure I don't miss any. They keep coming in. That's good. Keep them coming. have you considered Pickhawk's blue cube instead of orange cube since it's entirely U.S. built?
This is Blake. I think I'm probably good to answer that one. So the I'm working with the hardware integrator, and so if there's I don't want to open up Pandora's box to all the potential suggestions that are probably good suggestions out there. But if you do want to leave them in the comments, I will take note of them and certainly socialize them as we are in the tentative hardware planning stages right now.
Thanks, Blake. Yeah, that's a good idea. Again, ask for questions, but comments are welcome too. So if you just have a comment or a suggestion, please go ahead and put it in the chat. Like I said, we're going to keep all these and read through everything. So if for some reason I accidentally skip your question or don't get to it, leave a comment as well. That would be great. So we had another question come in about who can apply to it. So just a reminder, Marissa wanted to remind everybody that there is eligibility requirements in the posting. So the link is up there. And if you have questions on eligibility and who can apply, I encourage you to just go back and read through that. It's very specific and very clear. But if you have a certain question related to that it's not answered in there, please let us know and we'll do our best to answer. So I'm going to go back to the couple questions that I had submitted beforehand. Josh or Andy, I've got you down for this one. How long is the development time for phase 2? Does the 90 days include the entire development duration?
Yeah, this is Andy. I was waiting to see if Josh wants.
Sorry, Amy. So I don't have this. Yeah, Andy, I was going to let you because I don't have the schedule in front of me, and I think I've worked less with the. If you could answer that, that would be great.
Okay, so right now the schedule does show phase 2 being about 90 days. That's our constraints on this right now is the sponsor wants us to get this completed within this fiscal year, which means by September the 30th, we have to have phase 3 done. So that is what kind of pushes our time constraints for most of this. And to be able to execute phase 3, we're going to have to do that in the last month or two of that time frame. So that 90 days is, about all we have, and that is the development time. I'm not going to tell you that you can't continue to tweak your algorithms between phase 2 and phase 3 if you were selected to go to phase 3. I think that's fine. We're not telling you you're freezing the design at that point. But the predominant development time within phase 2 will be that 90-day time frame. Over.
Thank you, Andy. Andy, while I have you, one of the questions was, how do we get the resources? I know there's been some discussion on how individuals are going to submit their algorithms and various things for the different platforms. So would you be able to elaborate on how they can expect to maybe get the resources?
So I'm not totally sure what resources they're talking about. If they're talking about the GFE drones that Blake has already went through, I think we've kind of already identified a little bit of that of what we're doing with that. If you're talking about some of the information around the virtual environment and all of that, I think that's really Brent's field to explain through. So I'm not entirely sure what resources that's referring to. Over.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, Brent, do you want to talk about, I'm going to make an assumption here that they might be talking about how they would submit their runs and their algorithms. And I know we've had a couple conversations about excuse me, about this. So would you like to elaborate on that a little?
Certainly. So I imagine that the way you're going to download and install and configure Unreal and AISUM and Python or whatever other tools that you need to accomplish the mission. We will be then delivering a map, for lack of a better word, with the building and the other and the logging capability built into it. That at the moment is not too large. I expect it could be emailed as easily as anything. And then the data that you collect and that we generate, again, I don't think is going to be too large. Something along the lines of an email would probably be sufficient. Over.
Thank you, Brent. Got another question here in the chat from Savannah. For operation in a GPS denied environment, will the UAS be beginning operations in a GPS environment and then entering into a denied environment, or will it be turned on and operated in a GPS denied environment? So my initial thought was Josh, but any of the panel members that would like to jump in and answer this one, feel free.
Yeah, this is Josh. The majority of these scenarios are going to take place within a building. So at the entryway, they may incidentally have, if you have a GPS receiver, then yeah, you may pick up GPS. But using GPS to navigate the building, I think would not be a successful approach. And most of the scenarios are going to be judged sort of from entry to the building and exit of the building. And so therefore, I again expect that while yes, doing this in a GPS sort of denied environment is the ultimate goal, I don't know that we're going to go into any lengths to create a denied environment. However, given the bounds of the scenario, I think it's also not going to be helpful, if that makes sense. Yes, over.
Thank you, Josh. This one might go to you as well. It says, I see, quote, specific object detection and classification, unquote, in judging criteria. This is typically done with motion imagery, sensor-produced data, and machine learning detectors. Training ML algorithms can be extremely expensive using commercial cloud-based services and requires extensive training simulations. Will this training and test data sets be made available to the competitors?
So the goal, and if you noticed from the scenarios, we were not, too specific on objects and criteria and things like that yet, would be to set the object detection criteria such that they are not too complicated, right? So it could be chair, it could be red ball, it could be things from which there are available online libraries that are used for machine learning training. So I don't think we're going to be pushing any bounds in that regard as far as what data sets are potentially available. As far as the expense of using commercial cloud-based services to train, I think that's going to have to go within the approach that the vendor takes of how they train and how they set up a neural net or whatever to run on the available hardware. So that's one thing that we're going to have to look at within the submissions. Over.
Thank you, Josh. And since I've got you, I've got one more down here, and then I'll go back to Ken's next question. But from Michael, I've got the announcement indicates that additional hardware payload proposals may be considered. So what are the constraints on additional hardware?
Hey, this is Blake. So I think that question was for me. The main constraint is the airframe payload capacity. So with the current airframe setup that we are tentatively planning, there would be an available half a pound extra payload capability on that airframe, and so the proposals could be considered if they were under that weight.
Thanks, Blake. So Ken H has, I'm assuming the government customer is running the eval and the environments would be different than the training. I can take that one. So right now, the way we have it is we want, and if I don't answer this correctly, Ken, just let me know and I can pass it to someone else. But so the simulation environment, the different virtual vignettes we have, we want them to be as realistic to the real life event as possible. So we have taken a hospital at Muscatatuck and made it into a virtual simulation. So it should be very similar. Whatever scenario we have for the virtual vignettes, we're going to make it as realistic in real life. But like I said, Ken, if I did not answer that question correctly, you just let me know. All right, so let's see, I'm moving on to some we had before. Brent, I think this one's going to go to you. So it's a technical question, says, can we use AISUM's depth planner, depth perspective, or depth viz camera modes, image types during competition evaluation?
Well, our initial selection of AISUM was just from the reputation that we had, found out in the various events it's been used. At the moment, my feeling is that any of those capabilities will be able to be used. But as you will then find out, though, of course, those are not going to be necessarily available in the physical world. So that just must be taken into consideration. Over.
Thanks, Brent. And while I have you, have an update to the question I answered previously about the virtual vignettes. Wanting to know how are avoiding training the vehicle to that specifics and truly inventing autonomy?
Can you repeat that, please?
Yes. So one of the previous question was assuming the government customers running the eval and the environments would be different than the training. More specifically, but how are avoiding training the vehicle to that specifics, and how are you going to truly invent autonomy?
And we allowed to talk during this meeting? It may be easier to elaborate my question.
Oh, yeah, that would be great.
Okay, yeah, basically what I'm asking is if the environment's provided ahead of time and they're almost matching, how are you preventing, if you had an AI-based approach or whatever it may be, how are you avoiding the case where we've explicitly tuned the aircraft system and the response and the control systems to just basically beat the scenario so well, but then, the adaptability in, like, say you test an eval against a new environment, you really didn't generate autonomy there, you just generated script in motion. So I'm questioning how you are, evaluating us in that, we've actually performed autonomy versus scripting.
I can handle this one. So yeah, there's obviously a risk of overfitting your algorithms if everything remains the same from what we give you as training and eval and the actual scenario. So some things can change. The placement of objects, doors being open, doors being closed, obstacles. Maybe it's not the same back door you have to fly out. Maybe you have to find that back door. So there will be a certain amount of environment specific that goes into it. But there's probably enough in that scenario that can change that would kind of that would force you to actually have some higher levels of autonomy. If that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
And this is Josh. I'm going to elaborate on that as well. So we've created a model of Tech Hospital, and at least some of the real world scenario will be at that hospital. However, we've also, I mean, there's many buildings there, and originally we were planning for potentially 3 scenarios, and so it's likely that we will have a scenario that will run in a different building, yet with some of the same bounds, right? Entry door, exit door, things like that. And so there will be some scenarios there that will be different than what you may have trained to. Over.
All right, thank you. So moving on in the chat, I've got another question for Blake here. It says we may potentially need a GPU on the drone, especially if RF electromagnetic environment is challenging for offload processing. So the question says, I'm assuming this will be part of the payload we can attach, and is this correct?
That is correct. You could add, if it's with you could propose adding additional GPU if it's under the weight limit. And we are currently sourcing and discussing the availability and options of some GSE processing units that would be already integrated onto the airframe.
All right. Thank you, Blake. Sorry, I'm just reading through some more questions as we come in. Glad that answered your question. Good. So we have another one in Josh, this is probably for you. We had a discussion about this earlier, but the question is, for evaluating performance, do we need to store the predictions throughout the episode or render them as the drone explores the environment?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think our goal at this point is that the information of the environment is provided within a, as I've said, tactically relevant time frame after the drone leaves the building. You know, ideally, long term, yes, we would like the drone to report relevant information to an outside user as it conducts the mission. However, we're trying to compartmentalize the testing such that we're not testing communications bandwidth and stability and things like that. So right now, the idea is that the drone will exit. If you have comms at which you're exporting data, that's excellent. If that speeds up the delivery of the data, that's excellent. But if the drone exits and in a tactical environment, the user is able to collect the drone and offload the data and quickly get an assessment of what that drone has learned, then that will be an acceptable performance. Over.
Thank you, Josh. So we've got a question here from Stephen. So please jump in, Stephen, if I mess this question up. I'm probably going to turn this one to Andy. It says, how much of phase 1, 2, and 3 will be made public, if any, and will the maps for AISUM be made public?
Yeah, so this is Andy. I would say how much is made public. Phase 3 event will certainly be an event where we bring folks from across you know, various DoD and maybe even other government entities in, and maybe other entities, state and other folks into that event to potentially witness and participate. We will for certain be developing reports that we would be sharing with our sponsors and across DoD on the results of phase 1 and 2. I don't know that we would make that public outside of that. And some of that would move to the contractual side. So I would default to Marissa on what would even be possible there, because this is a government challenge. And then I think there was another piece there was maps on for AISUM. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I'm not sure I'm the right one to answer that. I'd probably default that one to Brent. Over.
turn that over to you, Brent. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I was trying to think of the correct answer here. I don't want to speak out of turn, and I think we need to check with because the building is an Indiana National Guard asset. I need to check with them and see how they feel about that being public versus being controlled in a small group. So we will find out that answer and report out in our accounting of this meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, this is Andy. So you might, I think Marissa's still on. Marissa, do you have any input on whether or not the results of the challenge can be publicized? Over.
Yeah, so I think that's definitely something that we will probably have to address after I do a little more research. So I know that a portion of it depends on, so like with prior prize challenges, I know some results will eventually be published by ONR, with them being a partner. So I'm not sure what the end goal for this one is, but I can definitely do research on that, and then we can try to address that question within the challenge posting as an amendment.
Thank you. And just a reminder, in case anyone's joined later on, we will be providing all of the answers to these questions in a Word document, and then update the challenge.gov posting like Marissa just said. So if you missed something earlier, don't worry, we'll get you the answer. And if we didn't know the answer in this meeting, we'll get the answer and we'll get it back to you as well. So Andy, I'm going to stick with you on this one. It's from Ken. So again, Ken, jump in if you need to. Are we allowed to exploit collaborating agents in the environment, or is this a single vehicle challenge?
I think the intent right now is for it to be a single vehicle challenge. We recognize that, being able to have more of a swarm type capability and interaction with other vehicles is obviously a positive thing within the DoD mission set, but we just have to set the constraints somewhere on what we're attempting to do and what we would be measuring and stuff from the standpoint of the prize challenge. So I think we're currently intending to limit it to the single vehicle. I'll default to Josh to make sure that that's in alignment with what he's thinking in terms of the criteria and the judging and assessing and everything. Over.
This is Josh. Yes, as the scenarios and the criteria are set up right now, I mean, it should be capable with a single vehicle. Ultimately, would I like to give you multiple GFE drones and see what you could do with that? Absolutely, but I think for this challenge, we're looking at mostly a single vehicle performance.
Thank you, Josh. And since I've got you, we've got another question here. It says, currently there are algorithms addressing some of these tasks in the proposed scenarios. So are you looking for a novel approach?
So this is Josh. Yes. Yeah, so there are existing algorithms that can handle obviously detection and identification of things. Most of the ones that we've seen there have been on the platform that they've been developed on, or running on computing resources that were set up to do that, right? So this is a little bit of a different scenario in that we're providing GFE, so we want some versatility and some modularity between the software algorithm and the hardware which it's put on, which is a little bit different. And then also, running these algorithms on the envelope, the hardware envelope that's provided is, I believe, also a challenge. But if it seems straightforward, we look forward to your solution. Over.
Thank you, Josh. Okay, so we got another question here. This is going to be for Blake. And I got two back to back for you here. So question is, for the AISUM virtual drone, will the government release a specific drone configuration, or can we customize?
That is a great question. And I think that is a question, that's something we should do some research into and get an answer back to you at a different time. Over.
Great. And kind of not a follow on, but along those lines, it says, Will there be video cameras throughout the interior of the building to observe, record the performance of each performer?
This is Josh again. We haven't, written the full test plan, right, for phase 3. But yeah, there will have to be some way to, even if just for safety and for monitoring, to document each run. So I would expect that there will be, but I would say that if there are, cameras or observers, that those will, not be part of the data available to the drone, of course. But yes, there'll be some monitoring of the drone's path and course and things, et cetera. Over.
And Tony, I might actually pass this to you to elaborate a little bit more from the beta team perspective.
Yeah, the beta team is going to be mainly focused on testing that virtual environment and ensuring that it's challenge ready. So we won't be so much focused on the actual physical component, so to speak.
All right, thanks, Tony. So let's see. Another question I have here, Brent, Josh, is probably going to go to you. It's a little more specific to the scenarios, the virtual scenarios. Is there only one exit goal position, so in parentheses, a rear door for the environment? Is the exit door from the same room level as the entry door?
There's a front door, and then there are 3 exits, one on each side of this generally rectangular shaped building. The entryway has a door that leaves the room but enters into like a hallway area, and you have to navigate through multiple rooms to find the exit. In terms of the goals, I think we're still kind of gnashing out some of those details, and some of those details will be derived from some of the papers that we get and hearing what other people are bringing to the table. But I could imagine we might have some multiple runs that go to different doors at different times. So again, back to kind of the not over fitting your neural network or whatever you might be using. Over.
Yeah, so this is Josh. And Brent's right. So there's, for the, say, for instance, if there's a timed scenario, right, where it's the time to enter the front, navigate, get out the back, while collecting some detection data, then there'll be a defined exit door, and that's the one that will be open. For one that's looking for more of a coverage mapping, right, there could be multiple. But some of the complexity of these scenarios, as Brent said, I mean, I know it sounds like there's some uncertainty here, but there's also going to be some tailoring. We want it to be a challenge, but we don't want it to be impossible. And so some of the complexities that we're looking to add are going to be tailored slightly based on, what seems to be achievable. Over.
Thanks, Josh. So I've exhausted all of the questions in the chat at this point, and all of the ones that we've received beforehand. So just a reminder, if you have any more questions, put them in the chat if you can. And this is going to be a little tricky. It's always a little nerve-wracking opening up the phone lines, but I know some of you have called in and may be eager to ask some questions. So I'm going to just pause here for a second. And if you are calling in, joining us, and you have a question, please go ahead and ask it.
Hey, this is Devin Beckwith from NAVSEA. Question on a simple question on what does GFE stand for?
Oh, this is Josh. It's a government furnished equipment. Over.
So is this really a competition mainly between government labs?
No, it isn't. It's not set up that way. It's a competition to utilize government equipment and yet provide capability of that equipment with algorithm software modifications and add-ons with potentially minimum hardware payload add-on to expand and provide capability to the government hardware. I hope that answers the question. Over.
Right. So you're not opening it up to any industry to compete. It's strictly government-only competition.
I would forward that to someone dealing with the challenge criteria, although I believe it is open.
So this is Andy. So it's a government challenge, but that's open to industry, academia, et cetera. There are certain details that you've got to get into to know whether or not you're eligible. Generally, the government is not eligible to win a prize on a government challenge. So government labs generally aren't eligible to win the prize in this prize challenge. So this is open to industry and academia, and almost is open only to them. So, you know, that's generally and again, Marissa kind of said this at the beginning, but, you know, there's some specific criteria that you have to meet to be eligible. And I'm not the expert in that, so I will defer to our contracting legal teams. But generally, industry and academia, this is open to. Over.
So the GFE is that the end goal, or like, I guess, because if industry is competing, then how are they presenting a government furnished equipment? Does that make sense?
So the intent is the government provides the hardware. In this case, the industry or academic participant would be providing the algorithms that would be loaded onto that GFE. So that's we're separating out the hardware side, the drone side, from the autonomy algorithms. What we're after is the autonomy algorithms. What we're not after is someone trying to worry about bringing us a better drone, if that makes sense.
Okay,
Andy,
so is there already a...
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, this is Dan. So one of the things that in our discussions coming out of this and pulling this together, we want to remove the software from the hardware. We're focused on the software, and the future idea is that you have platform X and Andy has platform Y. We'd be able to plug and play this software to be able to get autonomy on independent platforms. So the goal is to be able to have the autonomous software be the focus of this challenge. Over.
Okay, so you're creating an open API architecture for, you know, basically it's plug and play for, like, you know, third party type of entities to come to. Basically, you're creating a sandbox via open API architecture to play on any hardware system, regardless of what type it is. It's just going to give you a different capability based on the capabilities of that hardware, correct?
Correct, totally correct. And the other byproduct of this is what the goal is that we're doing a virtual playground that is exactly from a real environment. So we reduce the risk by providing as much of the playground and the platform to focus totally on the software that's written, that's going to be plugged in, seen in a virtual environment, and then walk over to the real environment and see it do what it could do in the virtual environment, or hopefully be the same. Over.
Okay, that makes sense. Then I guess there's already a list of type of hardware that you'd be utilizing, or is that still up for debate?
So Blake is responsible on the physical side. We have a very good idea of what it is. We are still getting some of the details, but Blake, you want to touch on a little bit of what the hardware platform is? Over.
Yeah, so the airframe is GFE. So the airframe itself and the design is a government-owned design. And the components that we are building the algorithms to, we are down selecting testing at the component level for hardware, COP components, commercial off-the-shelf flight controllers, commercial off-the-shelf cameras and sensors. That way, it creates the environment for fair competition across industry and academia, because everyone will have the same access to open source research materials.
Copy. So I guess what is the end goal expectation of or the outcome? Is it to have something that's operational by the end of phase 3, or like something that can be fielded, or is it just strictly to get into a prototype to then spiral develop to something else?
I'll take a stab, but I'll also hand it over to Andy. It's a multitude of things. One is that we're going to learn along the way. We're going to push the bounds a little bit with the stakeholders who are also participating with us. That can help drive where we're going. The opportunity for other government activities or other interest parties be able to take where we leave off and then continue. Hence why there'd be a contract mechanism that others could take and run with. We're also designed and hoping to be able to do another event next year with a little more complexity and kind of keep pushing the bounds of what AI maneuver can be. Andy, you want to touch on a little bit too? Over.
Sure, what Dan just said is completely accurate. So the inherent into a prize challenge that the government sets up through challenge.gov is the ability to go to phase 4. Phase 4 is a different contractual vehicle that would, if a customer, a sponsor, a PEO, or someone has a desire to continue to develop one of the algorithms and some of the products that come out of this further, they will be able to jump in and do that. We don't expect this to go from we get done with this prize challenge and we're ready to field. We will not have done anywhere near the level of development and testing and all of that to have something that would probably be ready to field. But the primary intent is to work on trying to improve the ability to divorce these algorithms from the hardware platforms and get to something where we have a that plug and play capability that hasn't really been done. So that's an attempt to do this and move the ball a little further down the field, and as Dan said, learn a lot as we're doing this. And then we do expect more follow-on efforts. We would like to run something similar to another challenge in a future FY, but that's all dependent upon budgets, funding, etc. So, over.
All right, thank you for that. I'm going to leave this open again. We're taking some questions from those who have called in. So if you've called in, I'm just going to pause. If you've got a question, please go ahead and ask it.
This is Devin again. Quick question on the overarching, metrics for success. How do people measure that? Is it strictly time-based, or is it effectiveness, accuracy rates, all the above, or is there something else?
Yeah, so this is Josh. That's my area. I would encourage you to look again at the challenge posting. So there is a judging criteria section. It will be evaluated, and there are multiple scenarios that will have different weightings. I again touched on this early in the conversation, so if you get a chance, review the minutes as well. However, evaluating time to successfully navigate the building, mapping our coverage percentage, object detection classification, and the time to report the results after the scenario completion. But there will be different scenarios with different weightings and different criteria associated with each of those metrics. I touched on that in a little bit more detail earlier in this call, so I don't want to repeat, but if on follow-up there's further questions, perhaps I can revisit that.
Amy, this is Brent. I've thought of something that, to answer some of the questions from earlier.
Sure.
May I have the floor?
It's yours.
So earlier there was a question about, where's the autonomy? If it just memorizes the way through, we win, we ring the bell. And Dan also alluded to that this was to reduce risk. So I want to kind of bring those two answers together. The goal, of course, is for you to create a generalized UAV that can navigate buildings, get in and out, and see things and count things and provide output for what would eventually will be, a SOCOM operator or something along those lines. We're providing the hospital an accurate, but mostly accurate, virtual representation of the physical environment so that you can use that to, after you've trained, use that virtual model to test your system to see if it's really going to make its way through the physical one. So that's sort of the goal of the hospital, the virtual hospital, is to provide you that, not necessarily specifically to, win the game by winning the hospital. And in the physical environment, as Josh alluded to, I would expect we'll be bringing in another building or two to demonstrate your capabilities. Over.
Thank you, Brent. I appreciate that. Just a reminder, this is a little bit of a time for those that called in. So do we have any more questions from those who are calling in today? If not, we've got some that.
This is
oh, go ahead.
Devin, one last question about the for the entire I guess competition. Will there be, if we're going to simulate, let's say, like a GPS denied environment inside this compound, will there be any operator touch points, or is it completely supposed to be operating autonomous?
So this is Josh again. So for this year's challenge, it will be operating autonomous up until the point it exits the building. At which point, as I said, there can be a hands-on portion where you offload data or whatever. We have discussed in future challenges having a human-machine interface portion, where the drone is navigating autonomously and then perhaps, responds to a friendly input, whether that's gesture or verbal or whatever. However, that's not something that is currently within the challenge as stated for this year. Over.
Copy. So the main focus is full autonomy inside the building and only doing maneuver and intelligence as the two primary AI warfighting functions that you're focused on.
Correct.
Copy. Thanks.
All right, thank you. So I'm gonna move back into the chat. We've got some questions here. One kind of funny question here I'd like to say from Daniel was wondering if there's any extra points for clearing the building in the dark with smoke and dust. I'll say we haven't decided if there's any extra points yet, but I would like to see that. So go ahead and bring that to the table, please. Okay, we've got a question here about partnering that several people would like to get answered. So one of the questions here is, are there any stipulations around partnering with participants as the competition progresses? So for example, if we solve problem A and another team solves problem B, would it be okay to group up and move through the competitions as one team?
Amy, this is Dan. I do believe this question would go back to contracting. I would offer that we have not discussed that. It was not in our original thought that there would be teaming during the challenge itself. I have seen this done in other, I don't want to say competitions, but other experimentation events. I do think this is very good about collaborations, but I will also say this is not a build on from problem A to problem B. It's more as a sequential where you submit the white papers. We review from the white papers of what the possible could be. We down select, we see it in the virtual environment, and then we select, and from that virtual environment, you will go to the physical environment and then do it again. So I don't really see us doing it as solve problem A, down select, and then have teams built from that problem A to solve problem B. I do like that concept. I think that's a very good idea. But I will go back to contracts and let them answer this. But I don't think it pertains for this challenge. I do like it. I would like to construct a challenge in the future that would have this. Over.
Marissa, I'll turn it over to you. Do you have anything you want to add to that question?
Yeah, so I would just follow up with just saying that it's something that we can definitely discuss with technical to see if that's something you want to pursue, but I don't know that we can give a solid answer within this session, but we can definitely address it when we issue the amendment.
All right, thank you.
From a technical standpoint, I mean, I would rather see something, you know, more successful than not, right? So if someone has a building navigation algorithm works really well, and somebody has an object detection classification, you know, algorithm or sensor payload that works really well, yeah, I would rather see those work together and have a very compelling solution. I think from my point of view, though, it does come back to that, you know, at which point are you aware of each other? How much time do you have to integrate and work together? And what are the contracting implications, which are outside of my domain? And that goes back to Marissa and others to answer that. Over.
But yeah, so great question. And I saw a couple other people chimed in and wanted to know the answer to that too. So we'll take that back to the team, look at it. And then when we send out these question and answers, we'll have a more mature answer for you. I think the extra bonus points added to another question from Arthur. Brent, this is going to be for you. Will there be dust and airborne particles in the simulation and potentially the real environments?
Currently, no. There was no intention of creating those sort of obstacles that I am aware of. Josh, you're maybe better suited to answer that. Thanks.
The line cut out. What sort of obstacles was the question asking?
It was asking
whether or not there's going to be dust, or I would presume other environmental challenges.
I don't foresee us injecting additional environmental challenges at this point in time to make it harder. I think, yeah, I mean, I think whatever incidental dust happens to be there will be the limit of it at this point. Over.
All right, thank you. Just getting caught up in the chat. There was some discussion about teams, so we're capturing all those comments. So thanks for everyone continuing to add to the chat there. So I'm just trying to catch up here. We have one from Daniel. Sorry, I'm trying to read this and decide who it's going to go to. I don't know, so I'm just going to read the question. It says, are there any concerns about using laser scanners or other TOF as they tend to turn into laser dazzlers for people using night vision?
This is Josh. Yeah, it's like time of flight, like laser LiDAR and things like that. I would say I don't have a concern about that right now. I think at this point, if there's, you know, a payload that someone wants to add that has that capability that allows them to execute the challenge, as the scenarios are written where it's autonomous within the unknown space, the, you know, quote, friendly operator is at the entrance door and then at the exit to collect. I don't see a fundamental contradiction between using that type of technology and the mission. So I would be okay with that. As we move forward and as things, you know, maybe progress phase 4, as Andy mentioned, maybe that would become a discussion. But I think at this point, that's not a limiting factor. Over.
Thanks, Josh. And then if you're following along in the chat, Josh Arthur asked, will robotic operating system be used?
Yeah, got it. Blake, that may be a question for you. I think you had the insight onto the flight control and other operating systems. Over.
Maybe could I request a little more detail to that question?
This is Rich Thistle. Robot operating system is widely used in the autonomy community. There is a very significant project to currently transition from ROS version 1 to ROS version 2 for the robot technology kernel, which is that GOTS package that I mentioned earlier. ROS version 1 doesn't provide any cybersecurity. And so it takes a lot of effort to integrate software into the robot operating system. So there's just hundreds and hundreds of different packages. I'm writing you a separate email now as I'm listening. Does that provide some context?
Yeah, perfect. And that'll be a question I'll have to follow up on. I will just note that the airframe itself and the airframes that we have looked at for consideration for this event are being developed for various customers and various requirements. So there is continuing efforts within the government community for the airframe itself. So those kind of questions, definitely send them to me or leave them in the comments, and we will address them as we can move forward.
Thanks, Blake. So I've got all the questions from the chat. I'm going to turn this back over to the phone lines again. Anybody calling in out there have a question? All right, well, we are going to, I'll continue to monitor the chat here, but I'd just like to go down our panel, those really part of our team here one more time, just to see if anybody has anything that they'd like to add. We've had a wide range of questions today. It's been really great. I certainly don't want to take up anyone's time if there's not any more questions, but I would like to offer one more just around the room for our panel. If they've got any last minute comments or questions that can, anything they'd like to add before we leave here. So I'm going to just run down here. Andy, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, just throw one thing out and say, Josh has already kind of alluded to this too, I think, but we have a challenge here. Obviously, there are contractual things that go on around it, and we're going to have to play within those. And while we say that, we really want everyone to be as successful as we can. Our goal here is to help you all develop algorithms and help forward the state of the art in this AI realm. So, that's what we're after. We are learning too as we do this. We haven't ran one of these prize challenges like this before, so we're learning too. We're going to be as flexible and agile and try to, if there's good ideas, good concepts, some tweaking of exactly, the details of sensor packages or whatever it is, we're going to try and flex and do that to the best that we can. And, at the end of the day, we have a prize challenge that we have to run, and we have to stay within certain contractual and legal bounds and all that kind of stuff as well. So we want to work with all the teams that jump in and participate in this. We want to be, kind of build a partnership with you all and try to move this thing forward as much as we can. And, we just ask you respect the fact that, we do represent the federal government. We have to run this above board and make sure that we follow certain guidelines and all that kind of stuff. But looking forward to it. We think this is going to be an excellent challenge. We think the culminating event will be very exciting. Looking forward to seeing some great algorithms, some great innovation on display at that. And that's about all I've got. Thanks.
Thanks, Andy. Dan Cable, over to you.
Sure, thank you, and I thank everyone for dialing in. As Andy was saying, this is a prize challenge. It's a different way of doing an approach to reach out to industry and academia in a government partnership. We're doing it in a cost-effective way. This is not a typical big DoD program with a lot of funding, with a lot of flexibility. In simple, we're doing this on a shoestring. We have funding set aside for prizes. This is opportunity for learning, all from the government and academia and industry. We want to partner. We want to keep pushing this. We see AI maneuver as a long ball game. We're not going to solve it in this event, but this is a stepping stone in a way that the teams can move forward together. So again, I thank you and looking forward to this event. Over.
All right, thanks, Dan. Blake, I'm gonna turn this over to you, but before you give any kind of closing comments, we do have one last question for you. It came through. So what is the endurance or flight time of the Stretch X configuration?
All right, yeah, this is Blake. Good question. The current endurance goals, I think we requested 25 to 30 minutes, but again, that's tentative and will and may change with final design changes. And final comments that I had were that the hardware team, our goal is to define the hardware and the architecture enough for you to build your algorithms to, what we also, have the desire to maintain some flexibility to be able to change and adapt to your creative solutions. So with that in mind, we are considering the size, weight, power, and cost. So if you do propose a solution, just understand that those are the things that we are looking at from a hardware perspective.
Thanks, Blake. Before I move on, I do have Ken says he's got a question on the call. So go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, mine's actually a few parts. The first one being, in the initial proposal, before phase one selection, even phase one, I guess, award or whatever you want to call it, down select, do you have to have an explicit proposed path in the kind of proposal, or are you just looking for, hey, here's our team, here's our ideas, this is what we're expecting to explore in the vignette and implement against the virtual and real environments?
Josh, do you want to take that?
Yes, this is Josh. So I would definitely be looking to see a specific path for specific proposals that you would be operating on. I mean, sometimes you get white papers that are just, this is our business and this is what we do, and that's a little bit too general. I understand that as we have uncertainty in platform and payload, you have uncertainty in proposed solution, and I do understand that. However, I would encourage people to be as specific as you feel that you can be.
Okay, and then I guess
allow us to actually kind of.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, and it definitely alludes to the point that you just hit on, is that, obviously being a proposal team or a winning team or assembling a winning team obviously is very dependent on the algorithms, software, hardware, and all the components around it, and how you would pose the solution, kind of rides on that as well. So it's hard for us to judge whether we'd be a competitive team or not, without some of the details around that. The other question I had was the AI component of this. There's obviously a lot of AI, ML, buzzwords being thrown around. Is the solution explicit on requiring, a traditional RL or supervised learning or, any of those AI-based approaches? Or, because a lot of this stuff can be solved with classical path planners, control algorithms, et cetera, is that acceptable?
Yeah, that's a good question. I definitely don't want to get caught up in the buzzwords. So yeah, I mean, the overall concept is AI for small unit maneuver, but the idea behind that concept is the general big picture artificial intelligence, right? Which is more, let's just call it algorithms, right? For small unit maneuver and autonomy, right? Now, however the mission effective autonomy is arrived at, I don't think anyone's going to care what computer science nomenclature should be applied to it. However, it does need to have a path forward under which it's versatile and autonomous and, you know, maybe even extensible. So I would keep that in mind as well. Over.
Okay, and then my last question is kind of regarding the down select. You know, let's say, you know, given that the prize isn't until the end, and you're looking at academia and industry potential partnering up to kind of, you know, go after the challenge in the spirit of challenges essentially, but the realities of you know, contractual work from both private industries or even academia researchers may get in the way of that. So what are any guards or, you know, caveats there in protecting that is from your guys' perspective and obviously, you know, from our perspectives?
Yeah, so this is Andy. I would say I think the way we've laid it out is there's actually a two-stage payout for the prize, right? So potentially there, and this is budget dependent a little bit because the final total amount of money hasn't been completely put in our hands yet. As you're probably aware, if you follow DoD, we don't have a DoD budget for FY21 yet. So, you know, there's some uncertainty there, but the expectation at this point is we have a two-stage payout. One is at the end of phase 2 and one is at the end of phase 3. So, you know, that should help that, I think, a little bit in terms of providing funds somewhat before it gets all the way to the end. But, you know, when it comes to managing priorities within a company or within the academic world against other priorities, certainly that's in you guys' ball court, not ours. So we can't really do much to safeguard anything there. That's going to be on you guys' ability to manage your own workload and programs. Over.
Right. I think what I'm alluding to more then is in the virtual environment, you know, the virtual down select essentially at that first like marker. Why not open up the competition to any candidates who are capable of submitting, you know, on the shorthand of, you know, if you down select too early and then you get people who can't, you know, deliver at the end, you know, it's a free program essentially or competition that, you know, I would kind of think it'd be beneficial to open up to anybody who's willing to submit their, you know, tech in, and then it's up to you guys to do that eval and down select, you know, post that virtual environment. But maybe it's just too much, you know, you might get overloaded on the submissions.
Yeah, that's the whole point. So we, as Dan's already alluded to, we're operating on a pretty small budget, right? So we had to manage capacity while on the one hand, we would love to say, yeah, anybody that's got technology that aligns, we'd love to see it. On the other hand, we only have so many people, so much time, so much capacity to be able to evaluate, assess, and whenever it gets to the final event, we're only going to have so much money for drones, right? If we hand a drone to every team and they could go crash it, that's real money, right? So we only have a limited budget to be able to do all those things. So that's what we had to scope. Over.
All right, thanks. That was really great discussion. Appreciate the question there. I do have one more question that came in, and this might be a Marissa contracting question regarding IP and data rights. So will industry participants be allowed to retain data rights on software developed under this effort, or is the government request GPR or unlimited rights?
Hey there. Yeah, so we do address this somewhat in the challenge posting. I'm trying to find the specific area that we discuss it. So essentially, I believe let me find the exact paragraph, but I believe my understanding is that unless marked otherwise, it's GPR, but hang on, I'll find the reference and then that can probably give a little bit more context.
Hey, Marissa, it's Eric.
Yes.
It's under 3C. But yeah, what Marissa stated is right. We're asking for government purpose rights. That's our ideal. But if you would like to assert lesser rights than that, you are more than welcome to. We will consider that as part of the evaluation. As mentioned before, there is a strong likelihood that we want this project to progress beyond this challenge. And if we didn't have sufficient rights to do so, that would be a factor that we would have to consider. But at the same time, we don't want to force anybody to turn over any rights that they don't want to. So, we request that you just keep that in mind and essentially let us know what you will be providing us.
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, thank you for that. So that ends the questions that I've got in the chat. So I was just kind of going down the list of our panel members, seeing if they had anything that they'd like to add. So I will ask Dr. Brent Reynolds, do you have anything that you'd like to add on the call?
No, I'd like to thank everyone for coming. I really look forward to continuing to build this environment and making it a little more accurate, looking forward to creating some of the grading mechanisms and looking over the results. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thanks, Brent. Josh, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Once I unmute, there we go. Well, so a couple specific things. So there was the discussion, and I look forward to getting the specifics on specific thoughts about robot operating system. I'll say that we are aware of that, definitely, but as was gathered from some of Blake's response, the government hardware is being developed sort of in parallel under some other funding and other programs. And so while the timelines actually work together very well, we're learning as we go here. And so some of the ways forward, we still have a little bit of control to steer things. And in others, we're kind of at the mercy of that funding and program. So that speaks to the more general thing. I appreciate everybody kind of bearing with us on some of the unknowns. I know it would be easier if we had a very specific list of, hardware specifications and things like that. We're figuring it out as we go here because we really do want to work with the proposals we get as well and have a good challenge and have something that's capable and successful. So thank you everyone for your interest. It was nice to see so many people online, and I look forward to having a good challenge as well. Thank you. Over.
Thanks, Josh. I'll turn it over to you, Marissa.
Nothing really to add from me. Just appreciate all the questions that were submitted, and we will work on getting responses out for those that we weren't able to address today. And I'm hopeful for a successful, and it'll be exciting to see how this challenge turns out. So I'm looking forward to seeing some of the solutions that are developed through it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I guess one last round. I'll open this up to anyone on the call. Any last minute questions? All right, well, we got that long, awkward pause. So I just, again, want to thank everybody for joining. Really great turnout. I hope we were able to answer some of your questions. If we didn't get your questions answered, like I said, we're going to go back through and we're going to get our team together to answer them. So we won't get them out to you right away, but we'll get them as soon as we can. And if you have any other questions in the meantime, you can always go to the challenge.gov link that you see on the screen there, or email Miss Marissa Wagler. Those questions will come to us and we'll get them answered as soon as possible and update the challenge posting. So without anything else, thanks again for joining us and have a great day.